G'day folks, MBS here. Well, today I'm going to be looking at a distributor. A good friend of mine just wants me to go over this one, make sure it's okay to put in the vehicle and fire it up. Nothing too special about it, it's only out of a GDR Tirana. So we're going to pull it apart, fix what we can with the spare parts we can get, and put it back together. I'm not going to cover recalibration in this. That's a highly, totally different subject. It does pertain to the distributor, but I don't have a distributor graph anymore, so I can't set this up in a distributor graph. But what I can show you is how the centrifugal advance works, how the vacuum advance works, how to adjust maximum total advance inside the centrifugal advance mechanisms, how the springs work, how the posts work, etc, etc. So we'll go into it into a fair detail. Our biggest problem will be getting spare parts, especially the fibre washers. Now, I don't think they're available anymore. This has got quite a lot of play in it. But I do have the metal shims from years ago that I've still got in stock. We'll end up using those instead, I'd say. You just can't use normal fibre washers, they'll just wear out too quick. So just let you know that right now. We'll see if we can clean it up a bit and get it back together so he can put it in his car and fire it up. Now, there's nothing too difficult to pull the distributor apart. You only take off the 2 screws off the vacuum unit. Oh, this one's already detached. That goes onto a little pigtail wire with a square nut on it. Now we remove that out of the way and we pop that circlip, and now the vacuum unit can come off. Okay. To test this unit, all you do is suck onto that tubing there with your mouth and make sure this pulls in. Yep, and it holds. So vacuum unit is good, unusual. Alright, so now we've got to just break the condenser out of here and just pulls out like that. Now if you damage that, doesn't matter, it's part of the condenser, so there's nothing lost there if you damage it. Undo the points, and sometimes you have to use a bigger screwdriver just to undo it, and then swap over to a small screwdriver so you can turn it. And there'll be a little washer and a spring underneath that one, so make sure you use that when you put it back. So that's those apart. Now all we're left with is the base plate, and that can be pretty tight, eh? So make sure you get the right screwdriver, and there'll be a spring washer underneath that as well. Oh, wow, that was tight. So yeah, you don't want to be slipping, so definitely make sure. Now, I don't know, yep, there's the washer. Gonna say, we're missing a washer there, but we're not. Put that back on. Alright, base plate should now come out for a little bit of help from underneath. There we go. And that is your vacuum advance mechanism. So, oh, that is very stiff. Okay, so once that's refurbished, that'll move quite easily. The vacuum unit would not have pulled this off properly, so it would have been lacking vacuum advance. To take the base plates apart, all you do is put a little screwdriver under there and pop out that little ball bearing clip, and then you can pull these apart. Okay, yeah, no grease there at all, so that's why it's probably been so tight. Okay, pair of pointy pliers. We'll take out that belt pad, and it's got oil in it. Yeah, so that's good. So we should have a centrifugal advance that actually works. Let's see if that's true. No, I cannot turn that cam on the shaft, so centrifugal advance looks like it's seized. Okay, but in there you can see 2 springs, a heavy spring, a light spring. light spring is your primary advance curve and your secondary advance curve. Secondary advance curve is usually loose, and in this case it is not. It is actually tight. So I'd say this distributor is seized well and truly. Now we've got to get this cam off, but before we get the cam off we have to take the springs off their posts, and we have to then be careful how we knock this out, and I'll show you that, how to do that. So we'll get these springs off. Usually it's just a twist of a pair of pliers is enough to get them off. So we'll get the secondary spring, we'll hook onto it, and hopefully we'll be able to just, almost off, there we go. You virtually sometimes have to open that the coil up a little bit so you can get them over the post. So that one's off. We should be able to take it off the other post. There we go, so that one's off. Now, if you want to, you can mark on your shaft which post had which spring. Okay, so you could put a yellow dot or something on that post. That way you get to retain the original advance curve that it had, because if you swap these over, the advance curve will be totally different. So I'd be doing that, but I'm going to be setting up the centrifugal advance in the engine bay, so I'm not going to bother. But for you, if you don't have that skill in your bag, then you should probably mark which way the springs have come off. Alright, now if this is seized, we're going to have an awful hard time separating this. So what I may do is put some bolt off down there, just a spray or two, and I'm going to jiggle this around until that camshaft moves and not make the main shaft move. So that'll be our advance. Alright, so we can put a screwdriver into the slot here, hold the bottom shaft and try and move it. No, it's definitely tight, so we're probably not going to be able to pop that off until we actually free it up first, which is a real pain. Now if we can't get it off by normal means, we're going to have to continue on stripping the distributor, taking the pin out of the gear at the bottom, taking the gear off, knocking the whole shaft out, and then we may be able to put a lever underneath the centrifugal weights and that cam and pull it up that way. But we'll try and do the simple way first. Now you can see the weights in there, so they're flying around, but this is obviously stuck on full advance by the looks of it. Okay, this is just too seized to get it apart while it's in the distributor, so I'm going to pull the pin on the gear drive, take the shaft right out, and then try and separate it outside of the distributor body. But this is what I normally do if I'm doing this when it's not seized. There are a couple of ways you can go. You could put a screwdriver in through here and a screwdriver in through here, put it underneath the lobe and then pull up. If the clip isn't too tight, there's a little round clip in there. If the clip is too tight, then all I do is get just a normal old punch, something that fits neatly into the hole in there. You hold onto the cam, okay, and just let the distributor body hang. Now put a bag of rags or something on the ground so this doesn't pop out and fall on the ground and damage it. So you grab a hold of that, you put your punch in there and you just bash the end of the punch there with a hammer. That will knock the distributor down. What will happen is you'll be left with this in your hand and the rest of the body will just fall down. Okay, so just allow it to fall down into whatever you're catching it into and make sure it's nice and soft, that the distributor doesn't get damaged. Alright, if you try and force this off any other way, you run a high risk of bending that little thin shaft that's inside there. And if you bend that, then you're going to have dwell variation, you're going to have each cylinder firing at different points, and that's not a good thing. So you're trying to avoid bending this shaft. And at the end, when we put it all back together, we will test that this isn't bent, just in case we have bent it during disassembly. You could check that beforehand too, make sure the distributor shaft isn't bent before you even start. It's a simple matter of just putting a screwdriver in here, rotating it round, slowly, and see if that gap between the screwdriver and that section here of the cam lobe remains the same, and that way you'll know if your shaft's bent or not. Alright, we're going to have to do this the hard way. We shall carry on. We'll knock this pin out. Alright, someone's already half driven it out, so we'll knock it out completely. You can see the gear is also cracked, so that's not a good thing. So we'll throw this one away. We'll replace it with a cast iron gear, much better than these plastic ones. So since it's buggered, we don't have to worry too much about how we hold it, as long as we don't damage the as long as we don't damage the rest of the body in the process. I didn't put that into the grooves properly. We'll just put that in there. We'll knock that pin out, then that shaft will come out. Alright, we've managed to remove it, and you'll notice there's a washer there, pretty thin one at that. We'll end up packing that back up with some more washers because the end float was way too much. Now we should just be able to pull this shaft out, and there we go. And we'll find another one at the top, and you'll notice that we're missing the fibre washers from both ends. Okay, they're all chewed up and spat out, so just don't exist anymore. And there's you might see a part of it down in there inside. All the rest of it will be crushed up. Okay, so somehow we've got to get this now off there, and having that circlip there certainly makes this more difficult. But I'm going to now clamp this whole shaft up and see if we can get this to turn. Look, we should have probably checked for end float, yeah? Let's put that back together. Let's just have a quick check. Okay, there is almost nothing there. Those bushes are still good, believe it or not. After all these years, those bushes are still fine. Now, if you had to go down this road of removing the shaft to get this cam off, then multi-grips are probably the best way to attack this. Now, when you're fitting the multi-grips, don't fit them onto the cam lobe or anywhere else on that shaft area, because you just won't get them to fit properly. Around the rotor area, where the rotor button sits, is where you'd fit them. And if you damage the shaft, it doesn't matter. You can just get a file out and just scrape the damaged section off. So we'll see if this... Oh, I've got it to... Yep. There we go. Now it's starting to move. Beautiful. Now we've got movement. Okay. So at all times, remember, we're not putting excessive lateral force on that shaft because we don't want to bend it. So we're just twisting it. So we've got this sort of free. We'll have to put a little bit more bolt off down the hole, and I'll keep working on this until that's totally free, and then we'll show you the way we're going to pull this off there by getting that circlip off. Well, day two. I tried everything yesterday to try and get this cam loose on there, but I still cannot move it by hand. I can move it using pliers and stuff, but that's still too tight for me just to knock it off. Like I said, the way I usually do it, just hold it in my hand and punch it out. So we're going to have to employ something a little different. Alright, so I've got a bearing separator. We're going to mount that on underneath the cam lobe, and we're going to use a smaller punch, and we're going to try and punch it out. And I think that'll work in this situation. At least it's not seized. I wouldn't attempt this if it was seized. I'd actually put it in a press. But I haven't got a press anymore, so we'll just have to make do with what I got, and we'll knock it out that way. Gotcha. Rightio. Shaft hasn't dropped out, obviously, because it's half seized up. Oh, rack off there. Now we'll get a thinner punch again and finish it off. Now I can easily see the circlip there. It has absolutely, definitely come off. There you have it. Right, success. Okay, so all we have to do now is just take the counterbalance weights off. They just slip straight off. Sometimes there may be a circlip in there in the earlier Bosch distributors, and there'll be 2 fibre washers underneath there as well. They may be destroyed, they may still be in good condition, but I've got, no, it just fell apart the minute I touched it. Okay, so fortunately I've got new ones, so they'll get replaced. Alright, I'll clean all this up and then we'll start to reassemble it. Okay, there it is, all nicely cleaned up, well, as best as I can get it with the equipment I have. Let's just talk a little bit about cleaning. When you're doing the distributor body, the best way to clean these is actually with a sand blaster or bead blaster. But if you're going to do that, make sure you put a shaft or something, a dummy shaft in there, so it protrudes out through the bottom. So when you're blasting, you're not getting sand and grit and everything down into the bushes. And you definitely need to plug this little hole up here as well, so no sand could enter in through there. Alright, so that's fairly simple. Now inside there's also a piece of felt that wraps around the shaft. Oil enters in through here from the engine, soaks into that felt, and the felt keeps everything lubricated. If you have a look at the top of the shaft here, you'll see a scroll. That scroll, when the distributor is spinning in the clockwise direction in this car, that scroll winds down and it stops the oil from coming up through that top bush, and of course, you know, you're going to end up with this full of actual oil in here if that wasn't there. So that's why they don't have a top seal. What else could I say? Now I've cleaned up the burrs that was left on this from the vice grips. Now you're going to ask, how did I clean all the rust off this? Look at that, beautiful fit, nice, and everything spins nicely. Well, I actually used a Flexone, alright, to clean that bore out. Very efficient, doesn't take any material off. All it did was just clean the rust. On here, on that shaft, I just used a piece of 1200 grit, wet and dry, and just gave it a bit of a polish up just to remove the rust, yeah? So once all that was clean, these two should slip together nice and easy. No movement in it virtually. There is, I can feel a fly wriggle, maybe even less than 1 thou. So that's pretty good. What else have we got here? Now this was, I reckon this was 50-year-old grease that was stuck on that ball. I had to use a screwdriver to chip it all off. Alright, so we've cleaned all these components. Now one thing you might not have seen yet is that little washer. Well, it's not a washer, it's just a little piece of plastic, and it actually goes on the shaft like so. So if you're washing in petrol, once again make sure the shaft is in. I was washing in petrol because I don't have a bead blaster, and I had my finger over that hole all the time, and I had it angled down like that, and I was using this wire brush in conjunction to get this as well. That's about as clean as I could get it actually. So yeah, bead blasting is the best option. Vacuum advance unit, you tend not to do anything with this because you do not want anything getting in there and damaging the diaphragm. I may give it a quick, this has been painted silver, I've given it a quick brush and that's about all I'm going to do with it. As I said earlier, you suck on that, that should come in, it should hold, and when you let go of it, it pops out. Alright, so we know that's working. Whether it's actually working within specifications, you won't know unless you put a vacuum pump onto there and pump up the actual vacuum while it's in the car. Then you can see how many degrees it advances. But that's the best we can do without the distributor graph. We've cleaned up the weights. Okay, so it's virtually time to assemble this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to assemble this with the weights in, the cam, the springs, all onto that, and then we'll show you the centrifugal advance mechanism and what that slot in there does, and we'll have a look at that, and then we'll assemble the base plates. I'll show you what to look out for then. Okay, here are a few parts that I said I had. I've got these fibre washers to go underneath the counterbalance weights, which will go onto these pins. Now this is a 1/32 of an inch thick, and it is 5/32 of an inch inside diameter and a 3/8 outside diameter. Now 3/8 is just a fly shit too big, so I've cut a little nick off the side, and that's going to face that shaft so that it fits in properly. Okay, at least they won't spin around. Oh, they shouldn't anyway. So yeah, we'll fit them up. Obviously I should be putting grease in, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Okay, the grease I'm using is just over here, and it is a PTFE high pressure grease. It's not your normal blue grease, red grease. That stuff's just too thick for my liking, and they tend to get solid after a while. Now I've also got here a shim kit from Speedway. There's the part number if you want to take that down, if they're still available, that is. And I think Moroso does them as well. It's just a random pack of spacers for your end float on your distributor. Now I don't have the fibre washers like I said, but I'm going to be using these instead. Okay, so let me get these weights on. I'll lubricate it all up, just a little dab, and we'll get those washers on, and then we'll put the weights in. Make sure the flat is facing the centre. Okay, now we'll put a little bit on the bottom of the weights, like so. Now here we have to put a smear on, of course, for there. And then we're going to do the same with the other weight. And then we're going to lubricate the skid plate where they ride on. Okay, so that should be not too heavy for it, and that goes like so, that goes like so, and there we go. Next we'll lubricate this shaft, same thing. We'll put a little dab in here. Okay, we'll put a little dab on the shaft itself. Don't need much, just a little dab. And then we will put these both back in, and then we'll slip that little fella on top. And there we go, beautiful fit. Okay, from there we could put the circlip on, that little circlip and flat washer, and that'll attach these two together so they don't come apart. And I'll have to do that in the vise. And I have a little tool for putting that circlip on. Nothing's fancy, it's a piece of 5/16 fuel line. Yeah, it's well worked. You can see it's flared out a little bit at the end, and bashed there where I'm hitting it with the hammer. The idea, you just can't push that in with 2 screwdrivers and expect it. You'll never get it. It's really, really difficult. You put the washer in, you make sure it's seated in all the way, you put that on top and you square it. You don't let it kink. You hold that punch away from that circlip, and then you just go bang with a hammer, let that drop down onto that circlip, and that'll click on over the shaft end, and it'll be fitted. Pretty tricky, eh? So I'm going to do that off the camera, so I don't have to keep setting this thing up all the time. Then we'll put the springs on, your primary spring, which is the light one, and your heavy spring. When we put the heavy spring on, the long end goes towards the pin. The small end goes on the hook at the other end. Okay. With the other one, same thing. You'll get a sort of long end. One will be completely round. Completely round end goes onto the pin, and the larger end goes onto the tag. So we'll assemble that, and then we'll show you the advance mechanism and how it all works. Okay, here it is, all assembled. Springs on, circlips in, greased up, working nicely. Alright, so I put the primary spring on the post that was bent the least outwards. That would have the least amount of spring pressure, and I've picked the right post because to me that seems perfect. Now the secondary one is not adjusted correctly because it's not cutting in at all. It gets right to the end of its stop and the spring hasn't activated. What it should do in the last 5 or 10 degrees, that spring should start to work and make this tighter. At the moment, this will have too much centrifugal advance at the 3000 RPM or so, and we need to retard it by adjusting the second spring. But that comes later when we're ready to set it all up. What I wanted to show you here is how it actually works. Okay, so there's the bob weight flying out under centrifugal force, and that's probably why it's called centrifugal advance. Okay, or centrifugal advance. And that's how it works. The weight flies out and advances the distributor. This distributor turns clockwise, so when we advance it, we go in a clockwise direction. That's basically how it all works, folks. The higher it revs, the more this weight is thrown out, the more advance you'll get. And it's all controlled by the two springs. Now you've got two stops in here. You've got the stop where it comes back, yeah? All right, you never touch that one. If you want more advance, then you have to file out this little groove in here, that little channel that goes around that post. So if you want a little more, file that, but then you have to also file the other side because it's doubled. If you want less advance, you have to put a spot weld in there. Okay, you can't use oxyacetylene or brazing rods or stuff like that. You don't want to be putting heat into the cam lobe section, otherwise the cam lobes will soften and they'll just wear out. Alright, so a quick spot weld in there and then just file it to suit. In this case you wouldn't bother doing, well, you'd have to not bother doing the other side because you're going less advanced, so that it just won't touch the other side. So you only need to do one side in that case. Alright, and that's basically how it works, guys. Pretty simple, eh? Because we're not using the fibre washer anymore, I'm going to put one thick washer underneath the base of this. I've lubed it up, put a washer on, put some more lube on. Now the reason I've done that is because you want to keep this central. Remember, there used to be a fibre washer here, and there used to be a fibre washer down here. If you don't put a thick enough washer here, this will sit lower in the distributor, which means the rotor is going to fit lower, which means the rotor is going to hit the cap terminals lower, and the carbon brush in the middle will be struggling to reach the rotor. Okay, if you go too high, put too thick here and nothing here, then you may not even get your cap on. You may bust the carbon brush in the middle, and the rotor will be sitting higher and it may wipe out the terminals too close to the cap. So you've got to get this in the right spot. And generally you just think, all right, there used to be a fibre washer there. If I put something around about the same thickness in here, it should be right. All right, so we'll adjust the free play from the other end when we fit this into here. So we've lubed that up nicely. We don't have to do anything with this because there's already oil and everything on the bush. So it should be well lubricated anyway. Unless you've taken it out and put bushes in, of course, then obviously you're going to probably lubricate the bushes a little bit to get them started. Well, I just went to review what I've filmed so far because I just had a couple of hours off and I just discovered that I've missed to show you how I put this gear on. Oh well, so here we are. We'll go through it again. I didn't actually use this method. All it is a V block, yeah, and a hole drilled right in the bottom of the V, bigger than the actual pin in the distributor gear. And what you do is you place the gear in there like so, and you knock the pin out through that hole that's drilled in through that V block, and that way you don't damage the gear. Okay, when you go to refit it, it's the same thing. You put it into the same section and knock the pin through. Alright, so sorry about that, but yeah, I did a slightly different method to the V block, but when I had my business I just had a wooden version of this that I used all the time to knock that pin drive gear back on. Alright, so now we're going to cover the base plates. Okay, base plates are fairly easy to do. You just put grease dabs on a couple of spots there where this is touching, and you put some around the diameter of that circle and some on that bit, and then you just slide the two pieces together, and you put a little bit on that hook that's around the end there. So now we've got that turning around fairly easy. Now while you're there, just check for side play. Make sure it's not worn out in the centre there. There should be no movement in that, only radial movement, no side movement. All we do then is just clip that ball back on, fill the ball socket up with grease, put your ball bearing in, roll it round, and it just clips in through there like so, and clicks into that pin at the back. And that's your base plates assembled. Now we'll put that back into the distributor body. Now we'll drop the base plates in. Now there's two ways this can go in, obviously. Now you've got to make sure that the pin is in line with the vacuum unit. So we could put it in this way, but there's nothing for the vacuum unit to attach to. So you've got to turn it round and make sure that it's in line with this vacuum unit where it's in the distributor. Alright, another telltale sign is this little pigtail wire, and that needs to go to the screw on the other side of the distributor to hold the vacuum unit on. So you drop it in, and it'll be a bit tricky at times. You just make sure it all goes in and clicks into the recess like so, and put your two screws in. Okay, next step is to put the vacuum unit on. So we want a little bit of grease on the pinhole. That's in the vacuum unit. A little bit of grease on the matching post. Okay, and then just put the unit in. Sometimes you may have to move the base plate so you can actually make it reach the vacuum unit, and then you push it over on the eye, and then you put your circlip on. Okay. Rightio, after fitting your condenser and your points back in. Now these are an old set of points. I'm going to replace them with a new one, but to finish this video off, I'll just use the old pair. Now you've got to set up your points gap. Alright, so the points currently aren't even touching the lobe while I'm turning it, so we need to actually create a gap. Now you can use manufacturer's specifications for that. So you just loosen the screwdriver's magnetised, so it's making it a bit hard. You got two little notches in there you can use to put it in between there and the points, and use that to open your points up. So there you go. We'll spin it round. Everything's so close here, and there. Ooh, just opening. It's not enough though, but the points are too loose for me to keep going. Hopefully my hands aren't too badly in the way. So I want to open those points just a little bit more. That's probably a little bit too far. See, I'm a dwell man, not a points gap. You'd certainly set them up by gap like this to start with, but I like to guess that angle in between there. It should be about 30 to 35 degrees, and that is not. Those points are opening too wide. So I will close that up a fly. Now, most important now, we use grease. We don't use the stuff I have been using for assembly. So we get a good old-fashioned grease, put it on your fingertip, turn the distributor in normal rotation, and rub the lobes with your finger to get the grease onto that lobe. Okay, once that's greased up, you should not wear your points out, the rubbing block on your points. Alright, now let's talk just quickly about centrifugal advance. In this particular distributor, you can adjust it while it's in the car. Now I'll just have a quick look in there to line up the spring. Okay, can you see the spring there? The secondary spring, that one is, because it's loose. I want to bend that out, remember, a little bit. So you just stick a screwdriver down here up to the post and bend it out. Okay, there you go. And you can do the same with the primary spring. So if I rotate it around, there's the primary spring. So once you get it in your engine, you've got your timing light on, you're checking your centrifugal advance. If it's starting too early, you need to tighten the primary spring, yeah? Just to make it start a little later. If it's starting too late, you bend that in, make it a little looser. So once you've done your initial centrifugal advance start, then you concentrate on the secondary spring and rev the engine up to 3,000, whatever it happens to be, and see what your timing advance is there. If it's not enough, you loosen the spring. If it's too much, you tighten the spring. Okay, so that's how you basically do a 6-cylinder Holden centrifugal advance adjustment while it's in the car. Obviously, the best thing is a distributor graph. We can also check vacuum advance that it's working. Yeah, so just put a hose on there, suck on the hose, make sure the vacuum advance is actually coming on and off. And that's it, folks. That's ready to go into the car. Well guys, I hope I've covered everything for you that you wanted to know about refurbishing a distributor. Now this is the Bosch one, as most of you would know. Very easy to adjust. It starts to get more complicated as we get into the newer vehicles. For example, when this turned into an electronic distributor, that gap that we got in there that we used to adjust the springs for the centrifugal advance, they don't have them anymore. You have to enter through the side. There's a little plug on the side of the distributor. Very awkward to do in the car. It can be done, but by geez, it's a hard job. I would prefer just to rip the distributor out, put it in my distributor graph and operate it from there, then drop the distributor back into the engine. Obviously you haven't got a distributor graph, but you may have a mechanic in your area that has one. So if you don't feel confident in adjusting this yourself, just take the whole distributor in, give it to your mechanic and he'll set it up whatever advance you want. Now you've got to remember too, the advance may be different to what it was 50 years ago. Alright, we were using super petrol back then, I think it was 98 octane. We're now running higher compressions because we've shaved the heads, decked the blocks, so we're definitely running higher compressions. You may have to have the advance curve changed a little bit. And your local mechanic that is a specialist in engine tuning will know all about that, and he'll be able to give you an appropriate advance curve that'll give you the best performance and fuel economy that you should expect out of your car. An advance curve plays a big role in that. Now, as you knew right from the start, the distributor was actually seized in this in the full advanced position, so it would have been gutless as hell, especially if they used the timing light and then found out the timing was way over advanced. They would have retarded it back to 6 degrees, not knowing that the centrifugal advance wasn't working, and that's where the timing would have stayed, 6 degrees all the way through the rev range, and it would have been very gutless, maybe even backfiring sometimes. So yeah, definitely needed a job done on it, and that should keep my mate happy, and I thank him for lending me the distributor. Alright guys, catch you in another video.